he comes. Here he comes. He's running. He's running. He's running. Catch it, catch it, catch it, catch it, catch it, catch it.
I'm Jamal Williams. I'm married to Jennifer Williams with 2 sons, Michael and Calvin. They're both 4 and 5 respectively. Jennifer and I have been married for approximately 10 years. We met in college, got engaged, married, moved to DC, and then ultimately ended up in Savannah, Georgia.
Clapping, 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 clap, clap.
I was diagnosed with Diamond Blackfan Anemia when I was 6 months old. I was born in Washington, D.C. I'm a twin, fraternal twin, and my mother and father noticed after a while that I was not feeding properly. I was crying all the time. My complexion was really dark, just a real moody baby, unlike my brother. So they took me back to the hospital to see exactly what was going on, or if there was some other issues that maybe the doctors missed during our birth. And immediately the hospital accuses my mom of child neglect and child abuse. So they proceed to call the police department and Child Protective Services and basically interrogated her, saying that she was not feeding me or taking care of me because I was a darker complexion than my twin and my sister, both of whom are lighter than I am in complexion. And she's basically saying, no, that's not the case. There's really something wrong with my child. I'm not understanding what's going on. You know, I'm a very good mother, and I'm just really confused here. So in the meantime, the doctors, not really willing to accept the fact that it's child abuse, proceeded to start running different tests, blood tests, x-rays, MRI, CT scans, genetic testing. And after a while, they came back with the diagnosis of Diamond Blackfan Anemia. My parents' first response was, my dad actually said, "This is BS. They're making this stuff up. We're going to take this child to another hospital." And ultimately, when everything settled down, the hospital actually apologized to my mom and my family, and basically said, we have to take these things serious because you never know what's going on in someone's household, and unfortunately we have to treat everyone the same, with the suspicion of guilt. And from that point on, my life evolved around constant medication and blood transfusions. Just so happens when I was diagnosed with my disorder, my father at the time was 26. He was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So a year later, in 1982, he actually passed away. And my mom, my brother, and my sister and I, we transplanted ourselves to North Carolina to be closer to her family. But through all of that, I was able to go to school. I graduated, top of my high school class. I attended college. I've been able to fulfill some dreams of mine. I've got to travel and do different things.
I met Jamal in college. Initially almost the entire first year we were dating, he never told me about his disorder. I heard from people on campus would say things like, well, what's it like to date a guy with AIDS? Did you know that he's sick and he's dying? And I'm like, what are they talking about? So he would just tell me that he gets pneumonia from off and on, weak immune system, but it was almost a year before he actually told me that's being a man. And I said, so what's really going on? So after about a year, he did eventually tell me that he had Diamond Blackfan Anemia. I started to accompany him to his doctor's appointments just to find out more about it. And of course, the internet was kind of new at that time, so I was researching everything that I could. He told me about what it was like growing up with that disorder, the things his mother had to go through, and so I kind of took it upon myself to try to help shoulder some of that burden with him, especially knowing we were in school and trying to get through college and And so when he had pneumonia, I would have to go visit him in the hospital, try to bring classwork to him. There was a period of time where he just showed up wearing a cast, a red cast, to my dorm room, and I said, what happened? And apparently he had broken his leg, if I remember correctly. It was like walking to class, just one day it just broke. Because of him having osteopenia. His bones were very brittle. The doctors had never bothered checking it, as far as I know. I want to say he fractured his finger once too. But I do remember the cast being the most biggest break that I can remember. So we spent a lot of time together, and anytime he had doctor's appointments, I tried to support him in that. And I think after about 3 years, eventually we ended up getting engaged and getting married. And there were concerns, I guess, from my side of the family that they were saying you were going to marry somebody that you know is sick, and eventually you know he probably could die. But I don't know what that famous quote is: it's better to have loved than never to have loved at all. We were actually told we probably would not have children because of his disorder, with all the treatments he had been through all his life, the prednisone use and everything else, that it just probably more than likely would not happen. He was tested by a urologist, and they said more than likely, because of what they saw in the testing, that we would not have kids. So we were married for about 4 to 5 years, and then we found out after moving here, we had been here I think a year. Then I found out I was pregnant. I thought I had the flu and went to the doctor, took like 4 pregnancy tests, and they were like, no, you're pregnant. And he was so happy. All he could say was, yes, it works. And 6 months after Calvin was born, I found out I was pregnant again with Michael. And so this has been our life. We've lived here ever since. We've been here 6, 7 years now here in Savannah. And it's been a challenge.
With this disorder, because it's a genetic mutation, my children had a 50-50 chance of having the disorder. They both ended up having it. Being transfusion dependent means that our trial of therapy for this disorder is that we receive blood transfusions. We're set on a regime by our doctors. Typically for a person that's receiving transfusion, it's normally monthly. So what will happen is, on a monthly basis, we'll go into our respective doctor. We'll get a CBC, a complete blood count, which then will tell the doctor exactly what our levels are looking like and if we're approaching the threshold to need a transfusion. Now, typical hemoglobin, which is what is looked at for transfusion necessity, should range between 12 and 14 or 12 and 15, depending on if you're male or female. Michael, Calvin, and myself, our hemoglobins usually hangs around 8. So the threshold for us is anything that's 8 or below, or 9 or below in some cases, means that we need a transfusion. And we'll also become symptomatic, meaning we'll start to show signs that our blood's dropping. Normally that entails headaches, fatigue, moodiness, and for the most part, we just really don't want to do anything. I know for myself, I can't drive. I start to get real lightheaded, real moody, don't want to be bothered, sit in a dark room, no noise. I really barely have energy to walk up 4 flights of stairs, or 4 stairs for that matter. Michael and Calvin are a little bit different in the fact that they're 4 and 5. So sometimes even when they're low, they're still running around like a normal toddler would be. They may be a little bit more whiny, not sleeping as good. Things as simple as their pattern of eating may change. So we'll go into the doctor, they'll do a CBC, we'll look at the results, and based on that, they'll schedule us for a transfusion, which means they'll do a type and cross. Now, type and cross is where they draw your blood, they'll send it to a blood bank, and the blood bank then will first check your blood type, whether you're AB or O or AB, and then they'll compare your blood with the donors that they have on hand. And what they're basically looking for are common and non-common antibodies in the blood. Once they find a compatible donor, you'll go in like any other day. They'll access your port. A port is a device that's placed in a person receiving long-term treatment, such as blood transfusions, chemo, anything that requires constant sticking, to keep nurses and doctors from having to stick your veins. I received my first port when I was probably 12 years old, and ever so often they're changed out. My port is on my right side in my upper chest. It's a small little circular disc that has a rubber top, and then there's a catheter attached to it, or a tubing, that's placed inside my artery, and it runs down close to my heart. Michael and Calvin's ports are also in their chests. One's on the right side, one's on the left side. Calvin has actually had 2 ports. He received the first one when he was born, and it was on his lower torso. And as he grew, the catheter was getting shorter and shorter and shorter until it eventually kind of pinched off. So they had to remove that one and put another one in. And this one will last him until he starts to grow again. And basically, on days of transfusions or any other therapy, a nurse will perform what they call a sterile procedure and access the port by putting a needle in it. And then from that needle, you can hook pretty much anything into it, whether it's another syringe or another pump or any medications and things of that nature.
Yay! Oh, you move your mask down? My mask? Yes, you can see a little bit. There you are. Good job, Mike. You were hidden under...
My typical transfusion will last approximately, it's about 2.5 hours per bag, and then I will receive a big dose of my Desferol. Michael and Calvin's transfusion can last anywhere from 2.5 hours to 3 hours. The recovery process takes anywhere from immediately to maybe a day or two after. As a child, I would get a transfusion and I would be fine the same day. The older I get, it takes me maybe a day and a half to kind of get back to feeling myself, because it is a procedure where foreign blood is being put into your body. So your body's going to automatically look at it as something that's foreign, and it's going to need time to adjust to whatever it is. Michael and Calvin, they're 4 and 5. Same day, they're usually pretty good and running around. And you can tell that their energy is back. So recovery period kind of varies from person to person. But on average, it's about a day to day and a half.
I know that when Jamal initially found out that his anemia was going to affect him to the point that it wasn't going to be good for him to continue in a management position, right around that same time, that's when I found out I was pregnant with Calvin. And so we had to weigh having to deal with the new baby and then having to deal with him working this, also work at least even 60 hours a week was a lot, trying to do that job at the same time. And the child, so with the anemia affecting his health, he ended up going on disability, which was very difficult for him because he's used to being the provider in the family. He really thought that he should be the big strong man to do all the work, and I should be able to stay home with the baby, and it just didn't work out that way. And you'd hear comments. I had coworkers at my job that would say stuff, well, how do you feel? Like, you're really the man in the family. You're the one that's really your husband's not the breadwinner and things like that. But you find yourself challenging yourself in these roles, these ideal roles of what women should be doing and what men should be doing. And I had to tell them, it's for the sake of your children and your family. You do what you have to do. There's no specific role that, other than caring for your family and taking care of your children. It didn't matter to us. I mean, I know it was hard for him because he really wanted to work, but eventually it took some time, but he got into it. He's like the most awesome stay-home dad. But with us finding out that Calvin and both Michael had this disorder, it's been a set of challenges with also both boys being diagnosed with PDD-NOS, which is pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. It's on the spectrum for autism. They're high functioning, but they're high functioning enough that they can walk, talk, feed themselves, and do those kinds of things, but the communication is really an issue for both boys. So they're both in speech, and Jamal sets he has the speech schedule. They're in occupational therapy. He organizes the CBC schedule. He organizes the transfusion schedule. So it's not even really a stay-home dad. He's doing full-time work just like anybody else would, and even if it was the wife staying at home. It's a full-time job taking care of kids. So both boys, as far as activities, they can pretty much do much of anything. With them having the ports, it's not recommended they do gymnastics or anything of that nature, flipping over backwards, not that they don't try. Calvin was recently diagnosed with having seizures in his sleep as well that may be related to the autism, and so that's another hurdle we're having to deal with. It's very difficult when you can't fix what's going on and your child is I think the hardest part is watching them in the hospital when they have to go through the transfusions. Mikey is such a trooper, but with Calvin, he screams.
Good job, Calvin. Good job. Say good job, Calvin.
And it's mainly one of the reasons why I don't go to the hospital during the transfusions, because he screams and screams and they have to hold him down. And he's always calling for mommy. I've gone several times when I'm off from work, but it's like it breaks my heart to watch him, to have to go through this, and he doesn't understand. Michael, I think, has a clue. But Calvin he doesn't understand why people have to hold him down. Why he has to have needles stuck in his chest, why he has to have needles stuck in his arms, why he has to have this medication constantly put in his food. And when I know with the autism, it's difficult for him to take it because he's on chelation medication also. But that's like the hardest part for me as a mom, is to watch, knowing that I can't. I mean, you know it's for their own good. They need that help, but you can't stop it. And the only cure you know of is a bone marrow transplant, which at this point, we don't have any matches with them being mixed race. It's very difficult to find a match. But that is, I think, the hardest part for me, is just watching all three of them. Jamal's been such a trooper, when having to watch him throughout, it was a little bit easier to accept. I had the treatments, we knew how they were going to go, we knew what they were going to need, but when they're so small and they don't understand, that's what makes it really difficult. But I wouldn't trade them for anything in the world. They are fun-loving, happy kids. They swim. They can do pretty much anything, as long as it's not too strenuous on the ports, because those do have to be changed every few years. Unfortunately, for Calvin, with him not being able to take too much of that chelation medication, because he tastes the grit and it has to be dissolved in water, he won't take it. They're looking at probably putting a G-tube in his side, so that we would have to inject it into his side, and if he gets that done, he will be severely limited as to what he can do as far as physical activities. So we're hoping, there's a trial at the hospital now. They're trying an amino acid called leucine, to see if, from other research we've seen, that it actually prevented people from even needing the transfusions or reducing the need for it. So hopefully we can get those iron levels down so he wouldn't need to take this medication. And I'm not looking forward, but it's an unfair realization that he may very well need to have a tube put in his side, on top of having a port already put in his chest. And it's something I don't want for any of them, but I mean, you have to do what's best for the kids to make them healthy. At the same time, I'm worried about their psychologically. I mean, for a child to have to be held down once a month, you know what's coming. He knows what's getting ready to happen, and to have people holding you down once a month. He's so scared when he knows he's going to that building. He'll do the look, don't want to go there, don't want to go there. And other days he's okay with it. He knows if we bring Michael with him, that Mikey will tell him, he said, it's okay, Calvin. So his little brother will cheer him up and try to get him to relax. But I think that's been the most difficult part of our lifestyle, is trying to balance out the schedule. Who's doing what one day? I can't really take off too much time from work because I need to make the money in order to pay the bills and pay the mortgage on the house, but I want to be there for my children. So that's the hard part for me, is being a mom and knowing that I can't be there. And then other times part of me wants to not be there because I know what's going to happen when I see Calvin's face during those procedures. So that's the hardest part for us, is the scheduling piece of it. There's not a lot of family time other than the weekends, and that's only if Jamal's not being transfused himself. So that leaves me with the boys on the weekend. There's never really a clear cut other than having summer break. There's no break for us. I have friends, co-workers that have been very supportive and try to help us out, but especially when we don't have family here to help us out, it's just kind of, that's been our lifestyle. We just get used to scheduling speech, occupational, CBC, transfusion. Does mommy have a day off? Does daddy have his transfusion? And just trying to balance all those things out. And then, of course, hospital bills. That's a whole nother topic.
With any sort of disorder or terminal illness comes the question of paying for that. Treatments and drugs and therapies. And insurance is a big part of that. And needless to say, with a genetic disorder or something you're actually born with, or for anything that runs in your family, they're always considered pre-existing conditions. And as a child, I can remember nights with my mom crying and afraid that we're going to lose our home because she can't keep up with my medical bills. As a kid, I was on drugs that cost as much as $1,500 a month, or a week just to take, because a lot of them were experimental, or they were just, so expensive that, really no one could afford them. Luckily, in today's society, we have things like Medicaid and Medicare that kind of help and coexist, but you still can't get over that pre-existing clause with insurances. Lucky for us, in 2014, we now have the Affordable Care Act, the getting rid of pre-existing conditions. Transfusions are very expensive. For Michael and Calvin, it's about $5,000 per transfusion. For me, it's a lot higher. And the insurance will pick up the slack for that, and then the co-insurance picks up the rest of the slack. We will still get hospital bills, but they're nowhere nearly as high as receiving a $434 bill or a $500 bill for one transfusion. And unfortunately, we're in a situation there where we won't have to sacrifice our home or our boys' future and their education in the future to pay for medical bills. And for me, it's been a godsend. I really love the president for getting that law passed, and I think it's one of the best things that could have happened for people with long-term illnesses such as cancer and HIV and AIDS and blood disorders. So that's my point of view. That's my opinion. The Red Cross actually plays a large part in us maintaining our life and being able to receive the treatments that we're on. The more blood that they receive, the better the chances are that they can find a match for myself, Michael, and Calvin. Even if you don't know your blood type, it's always good to donate, because not only will you might save my life or my children, you could save someone else's life. And from 1 unit of blood, you can save more than just one life, because blood is separated between red blood cells, plasma, and then a couple other things. So that blood goes a long way, and the people that it can actually reach.
Calvin is very inquisitive. He is into technology. He loves tablets, iPads, computers, that kind of thing. He is a dinosaur lover, a dolphin lover, an ocean lover, crabs and lobsters. I don't know what it is about crabs and lobsters that he loves so much. And whales, basically anything that's ocean life, farm animals. The zoo is like his most favorite place to go. Dinosaurs is also his biggest thing. He loves giant stuffed dinosaurs. And he's just very inquisitive. He likes to explore nature, anything around him. Michael, Michael doesn't sit still for very long. Michael likes to get into everything. He is a Lightning McQueen, Mickey Mouse type of boy, race cars. He loves anything that makes loud noises, trains. He likes to see how trains work and how he can get tracks to connect and do different things. I think they do what normal brothers do. They try to hurt each other and jump on top of each other and wrestle, and that's what they like to do. So they do the normal brotherly thing, but they're very protective of each other.